Mr. President, I ask to unanimous consent to enter into a colloquy with my colleague, the Senator from South Carolina, Senator Graham.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I come today to the Senate floor as a physician who's practiced medicine in Wyoming for a quarter of a century, taking care of the families of Wyoming, and to do what I've done throughout the past year, provide a doctor's second opinion on this health care law that people across the country are now coming to grips with as they finally are realizing what is in the bill, or as the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, has once said, you have to, former Speaker of the House, Mr. President, said first you have to pass it before you get to find out what's in it. People are finding out what's in it, and people all across the country are not happy. We know what the American people want. I know what the people of Wyoming want in terms of health care. They want the care they need from the doctor they want at a cost they can afford. And that was a goal that many of us had over a year ago when we started this discussion and debate on the Senate floor. And what ultimately got passed, and many people believe crammed down the throats of the American people, was now a health care law where people are at risk of losing what they want and what they have. And the promises made by the President are such that they've turned to be in many ways unfulfilled. The President said this would actually drive down the cost of care, the health care law, that insurance rates would go down $2,500 per family. And what people have seen all across the country is the cost of their health insurance rates going up instead of down. The President said if you like the care that you have, you can keep it. Now we know that a majority of people who get their health insurance through their work are not going to be able to keep the coverage that they have liked. So I come to the floor with my colleague, Senator Graham, because we introduced a bill, Senate 244, the State Health Care Choice Act, which allows states to make a decision to say, is this something that we want in our state? And I know I turned to my colleague from South Carolina before getting into the specifics of this. I know you visited with your governor about the concerns that your governor has, newly elected governor, who had concerns and actually addressed those concerns with the President about the health care law and the mandates on the people of South Carolina. So I'd ask my friend and colleague, are there things that we as a body ought to be considering to make life easier for the people of your home state of South Carolina? And I can talk about the things for Wyoming as well.
Yes, if I may, Mr. President, respond to my colleague. Number one, to Senator Barrasso, who's an orthopedic surgeon, you've been a great addition to the Republican conference, but the Senate as a whole. You're a doctor. You've been practicing medicine longer than you've been in politics, I'm sure, and you see this problem from a physician's point of view, from a patient's point of view, and our presiding officer, recently a governor. Here's what my governor's telling me, that Medicaid is a program that needs to be reformed, not expanded the way we're doing it. The second largest expense to the state budget in South Carolina is Medicaid matching money. For those that are home who may be watching, Medicaid is a program for low-income Americans. It's a federal program and a state program, but it's a federal government mandate that if you reach a certain income level, you're eligible for Medicaid services to be administered by the states. But quite frankly, the flexibility the states have is very limited. And this bill, the Obama health care bill, expands Medicaid eligibility to the point that 29% of the people in South Carolina would be Medicaid eligible. Our state has an $850 million shortfall in our budget. I think Wyoming's in pretty good shape, but I think we're probably closer to the average state. We've had a dramatic decrease in revenues, and the cost of complying with the Medicaid expansion in this bill would be $1 billion to a state that can't afford it. Now, I'm sure West Virginia is very similar. So here's my commitment to the body. I would like to give the states an opportunity to speak as to whether or not they want the individual mandate, the Medicaid expansion and employer mandate that I think adds a lot of cost to business, that will decrease job opportunities at a time when South Carolina needs every job it can get. But one thing we could do by passing this legislation is get this debate out of Washington, where everybody's kind of dug their heels in, and listen to the people. That's the one thing we haven't been able to do. This bill passed under the cover of darkness on Christmas Eve, in a process that is not reflective of the hope and change we all would like to have. It was the worst of Washington. It's not like the Republican Party's never done behind closed doors passing bills on a party line, but we're all trying to break that formula, and this bill passed on a party line vote on Christmas Eve. To get the 60th vote, quite frankly, was unseemly. So what I'm hearing from my governor is, please give me some relief from a Medicaid program that's drowning my state. So after this opportunity comes to take the debate to the state level, I'd like to join with Senator Barrasso and the presiding officer and anyone else in this body who wants to come up with a way to fix Medicaid before it bankrupt all the states. So this opt-out approach, I think, would make the debate more meaningful. It's not just about what people in Washington think, it's about what America wants and what Americans think, and the best way to get their opinion is to allow them to speak at the state level. So to my colleagues on the other side, if you believe this is a great bill, then give other people a chance to validate what you think. We may be wrong. Senator Barrasso and I may be wrong. We may be hearing criticism from this bill that's very limited, unique to Wyoming and South Carolina. I don't think so, but we'll never know till we give the chance to people to speak. And that's what this bill does. It allows states, if they choose, to opt out of the individual mandate, the employer-mandated Medicaid expansion. So to my colleague from Wyoming, what are you hearing about the effect of this bill on the state of Wyoming, and where do you think we should go as a nation?
Well, the people of Wyoming overwhelmingly want an opportunity to remove themselves from the heavy burden of the Obama-passed supported health care law. Huge expenses. The Medicaid mandate is huge. The expenses.
I can interrupt and ask you. Waivers have been given. Can you tell us a little bit about the waivers that have been granted, and aren't we basically allowing a state to request a waiver by our bill? Could you comment?
Well, we are doing exactly that. As I say to my colleagues from South Carolina, you know, as of last week, the Secretary of Health and Human Services has given, just last week, 500 new waivers to allow individuals who get their insurance through work, and now a total of 729 waivers affecting 2.2 million people to opt out, of the specific requirement. And I think states ought to have a right to make decisions about the Medicaid mandate, about the individual mandate that requires everyone to buy government-approved health insurance. Mandate that the Congress is telling people they have to buy government-approved health insurance. I think it's unconstitutional. The Supreme Court will ultimately decide. And people get penalized. There's going to be IRS agents checking to make sure people have bought this government-mandated and government-approved health insurance. I think people ought to be able to, the state ought to decide if they're going to make every employer in the state, the business creators, the people that hire people, the small businesses, the job creators. I think a state ought to have a right to make a decision to say, are we going to make those individuals, force them to provide government-approved health insurance? It's a big cost for businesses who are trying to hire people. And I think states ought to be able to opt out of the benefit mandate, which defines how much insurance somebody has to have. And in many cases, it's overinsurance, more than they need, more than they want, more than they can afford.
What percentage of the waivers have involved union plans?
Well, of the 2.2 million people that have gotten waivers by the Secretary of Health and Human Services, and as I say, you need to have friends in high places if you want a waiver, because I know the small business owners in my state and probably in your state as well couldn't just get to the Secretary of Health and Human Services to get these waivers. But 860,000 waivers have gone to members of 166 different unions, benefit programs. And it's interesting because across the country, unions have received 40% of the waivers, but yet union members are only 7% of the workforce. So it seems a disproportionate number of these waivers have been given to members of the unions. And the thing that I find so intriguing is that these are the same people from the same unions that lobbied so hard to get this health care law passed. Well, now that they know what's in it, they don't want it to apply to them. And that, Mr. President, is a concern that I think the American people say, well, if all these different union members can get a waiver, why can't I? Why can't the state get a? Why can't states be able to opt out as well? A national poll last Friday, February 4th, the majority of Americans say that states ought to have the right to opt out of the health care law. A majority of Americans believe that that their state ought to have a right to opt out. We now know that 7 states, Arizona, Georgia, Idaho, Louisiana, Missouri, Oklahoma, and Virginia, have already passed laws or constitutional amendments making it illegal to force anyone to buy health insurance. Their state legislatures, I mean, to me, that's how I'm reading it. They say, we're going to opt out whether this law passes or not.
So along that line, to my colleague, Mr. President, if I could pose a question, how many states have joined the lawsuit saying the individual mandate is unconstitutional, if you know that number? And you've just indicated that how many states have passed state laws saying we shouldn't be required to comply with individual mandate?
Yes. 7 states have already passed laws or constitutional amendments making it illegal to force someone to buy health insurance.
Do you know how many states have joined the lawsuit?
26 states have joined the lawsuit, including my home state of Wyoming, which recently joined. New governors have been elected and sworn into office in January, and so there are 5 new states that have joined the lawsuit, saying this law isn't constitutional. The people from Congress shouldn't be able to go into your home and make you buy a government-approved product if you don't want to buy it. And there have been rulings, and your background is superior to mine in the legal field of the courts, but it sure sounds to me like rulings from Virginia and Florida uphold my firm beliefs that Congress can't make people buy products.
Well, if I may, I think you're going to find this case going to the Supreme Court in a year or two. Sooner the better, as far as I'm concerned. I don't know how the court will rule, but I can understand why attorney generals would be arguing that requiring someone to do something to create activity is probably a real stretch of the Commerce Clause. Where does it end? So there's 2 sides to that legal coin. But my point is, I doubt if the attorney generals of these states, who are mostly elected, I'm sure all of them are elected, would be bringing a lawsuit to challenge the constitutionality if they believe their constituents were really for the bill. Does that make sense to you, that 26 attorney generals would be suing the federal government in court if they believed their own citizens felt like this was the right way to go?
Well, I think that the attorneys general are making decisions based on what they believe is in the best interest of the citizens of their state, and are saying people of our state have rights, and we have a constitution, and that constitution should trump the 2,700-page health care law.
And if I could make this point to my colleague, no judge is going to ask the average person what they think, nor should they. This is a legal question, and I really don't know how it's going to come out. I think it's probably 50-50. But what we're doing different, to my friend from Wyoming, is that we're not saying you need to pass it all from Washington or repeal it all from Washington. We're saying allow people to comment on the product that was created on a party line vote on Christmas Eve in an unseemly fashion, by allowing people at the state level through their elected representative to have a say. That's different than a court challenge. That's different than a Washington debate. And quite frankly, if you're going to turn 1/5 of the economy upside down, I think it would be very helpful to this country to involve our fellow citizens. This will be a constitutional academic decision made on the law. What we're trying to do, to my good friend from Wyoming, is to take the debate on health care to the state level so people can speak up before we lock the country into a plan that I think is going to ruin the viability of the state's budgets by expanding Medicaid to 150% above poverty. And Is that not the purpose, is to get people to speak a chance they've never had to this point?
Well, what do people want? What do states want? I mean, flexibility, freedom, and choice. Flexibility, freedom, and choice. I mean, I know that's what people of Wyoming want. It's, rugged individuals, we want flexibility, freedom, and choice. And I think every state ought to have that opportunity to make that decision, and that's why this bill is on the floor of the Senate. Now, last week I did vote to repeal the entire Obama health care law because I think it's bad for patients. I think it's bad for providers, the nurses and the doctors that take care of those patients, and I think it's bad for the taxpayers. I think it's going to bankrupt the nation. What is now happening is it's also bankrupting the states and governors having to deal with this Medicaid mandate are realizing that to listen to Washington, they're going to have to take money away from education, they're going to have to take money away from public services, and they ought to have a right to make a decision at the state level as to what they want to do, what laws ought to apply. One size doesn't fit all. One size does not fit all, Mr. President. And I know what works in Wyoming and is not necessarily what works in South Carolina or West Virginia, and certainly not works in California or New York. And that's why states ought to make a decision about ways to help people in their own state get the care they need from the doctors they want at prices they can afford. This massive health care law does not accomplish that.
One final question, and I do appreciate the chair's indulgence. The whole idea of the status quo being acceptable is not what we're talking about. None of us believe that the current health care situation is sustainable. Medicare and Medicaid need to be reformed, but so does private health care cost increases. There are monopolies out there by insurance companies. To be able to buy across state lines makes a lot of sense to me. So briefly, if you could, what do you see? I mean, I want to repeal the bill, not just to maintain the status quo, but to replace it with a bipartisan product that really does improve quality and lowers cost. Is that your position, and how can we do that?
Well, there are things we absolutely must do to make it easier and cheaper for people to get health care that they need from the doctors that they want at a price they can afford. And number one is, as you mentioned, make it legal for people to shop around and buy insurance across state lines. Can't do that right now in this country. That in itself, as studies show, would result in over 10 million Americans who don't have insurance today getting insurance. And then, you know, most people get their insurance through work for the simple reason that it's a tax deduction to the company that they get their insurance through. But if they buy insurance personally, individually, they have to pay taxes on that money before they pay for the insurance. So I think people who end up buying their health insurance individually ought to get the same tax benefits that those who get it through work. And that would make a big difference, bring down the specific cost to those folks. And I think we need to have incentives in this that help people actually stay healthy. And you know, I ran a program in Wyoming as a volunteer called the Wyoming Health Fairs, bringing low-cost health screenings to people. I did health reports on television called Helping You Care for Yourself, giving people information they could use to stay healthy. This health care law has money in it aimed at prevention, but it basically has money for jungle gyms and street lamps and pathways, but nothing to actually, no incentive to get somebody to get up and exercise and get their weight down, their cholesterol under control, their blood pressure under control. And then I think you have to do something about the lawsuit abuse that is out there, which drives up the cost of care as doctors order tests, not necessarily to help the patient, but to make sure they're not missing some very rare condition, but that significantly adds to the cost of care and to the billions and billions of dollars every year.
Well, on that note, I would just say to the President and to my friend from Wyoming, there seems to be a lot of ways to lower cost, and the status quo is not acceptable, but the solution we have chosen in a very partisan way, I think, is going to drive up the budget deficit, is going to eventually lead to more people being in government-run health care at a time when the government is broke, and is quite frankly going to take the state budget problems and make them unsustainable just by expanding Medicaid. And our bill is pretty simple. If you think this is a very good idea, let it be tested by your fellow citizens through an opt-out provision. If you think this is a bill that most people would opt out if they could. On our side, give them a chance. The lawsuit is important, but this is a decision the nation needs to make, and the lawsuit is one way to approach this, but the best way to come up with health care solutions, I think, is not go to court, but to have the Congress and the states and the people of America work together in a partnership. And that's what we have not been able to achieve. A partnership where we listen to the states and to the people, and from their input we pass laws in a bipartisan fashion. That is what I hope will happen.
And that's why today we come to the floor to discuss S-244. The title is State Health Care Choice Act. That's what it really is. State, health care, and choice. A choice to be made by the states about health care, because if the American people want anything, it's flexibility, freedom, and choice. Thank you,
Mr. President, thank you for the time, and to my colleague, I've enjoyed the discussion. To be continued, and we'll yield the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President.